At 4:12 a.m., the Baltic coast near Baltiysk lay under a heavy mist, the port lights barely piercing the fog. Without warning, Russian submarines fired heavyweight torpedoes from beneath the Gulf of Gdansk, while S-400 launchers onshore powered up their radars, locking onto Ukraine's incoming drone flotilla from the west. This was no random skirmish, it was a full-spectrum clash across sea, air, and land. Baltiysk was not just a port, it was the beating heart of Russia's Baltic fleet. In seconds, the calm would shatter, and what followed would become a lesson in modern warfare. The first wave came swiftly after the Russian torpedoes cut through the water. From the western horizon, Ukraine launched a screen of coastal reconnaissance drones, their small frames skimming just 150 feet above the sea, mapping every radar pulse and heat signature around Baltiysk. Beneath them, unmanned surface vessels USVs crept forward at barely 25 miles per hour, hugging the wake of the waves as they closed to within 3 miles of the harbor entrance. Overhead, FPV drones darted in erratic patterns, while long-range UAVs at 12,000 feet projected decoy signals, crafting a corridor of false echoes across Russian radar scopes. Baltiysk's defenders reacted quickly. A Staragushi-class corvette tied up less than 900 feet from the main pier, powered up and brought its deck guns online. From the shoreline, a Panzer S-1 battery rolled forward, its twin 30mm cannons and 12 missile tubes tracking the incoming swarms. Warning sirens echoed through the harbor, and radar operators reported multiple contacts converging at once. What Ukraine had set in motion was not yet the killing strike, but the opening probe. By forcing Russia to light up its defenses, naval, ground, and radar, the Ukrainian drones were mapping every blind spot, every angle of fire, and every reaction time. Baltiysk, the fortress port of the Baltic fleet, was now fully awake, its defenses burning power and ammunition at a pace Ukraine had calculated from the very start. The probing strikes had forced Baltiysk's defenders to fully reveal themselves. But Ukraine's real play was only beginning. Minutes after the first wave of reconnaissance drones and USVs triggered the alarm, a second formation appeared low over the Baltic waters. Flying barely 200 feet above the waves, dozens of kamikaze drones raced forward in a wide arc, their engines buzzing like a swarm of wasps. To Russian radar operators, this was the main assault, fast, direct, and lethal. The reaction was immediate. S-400 launchers stationed east of the port swung their tubes skyward and let fly their first interceptors. Streaks of fire ripped across the dawn sky, covering distances of 30 miles in seconds. From within Baltiysk itself, Buk-M3 batteries engaged, their missiles climbing rapidly to meet the low-flying drones. Radar screens filled with tracks, icons flashing red as operators struggled to separate real threats from decoys. Every available defensive system was burning through ammunition, and the entire harbor echoed with the roar of engines and missile launches. Out at sea, hidden beyond the 12-mile line, Ukrainian patrol vessels executed the second phase of the trap. From their launch rails came KH-31P anti-radiation missiles, skimming at Mach 2 toward the glowing Russian radars. The moment Russian operators switched to full-power scanning, they became targets. Within minutes, the air defense net that had seemed impenetrable was under pressure, radars flickering as crews switched frequencies or went dark to avoid being struck. By the time the first wave of kamikaze drones detonated against the outer defenses, the real purpose of the sacrifice was clear. Many of the small UAVs were shredded by missiles or gunfire, but each one forced Russia's systems to expend precious interceptors. Each one carved seconds of distraction into the defensive rhythm. Behind the smoke and wreckage, the radar grid now carried holes, blind corridors where Ukrainian strike assets could slip through unseen. Baltiysk's garrison had won the exchange on the surface, downing wave after wave of drones, but they had paid a hidden price. The air defense network was stretched, its operators fatigued, its interceptors depleted. In the darkness beyond the horizon, Ukrainian crews watched the flicker of radar screens grow erratic. The fortress port had survived the opening blows, but the shield around it was cracked, and through those cracks, the next strike was already closing in. The smoke of intercepted drones still lingered over Baltiysk when the battle shifted beneath the waves. Russia, unwilling to let the port's defenses be dictated by swarming UAVs, committed one of its most dangerous assets, a Kilo-class submarine lurking just outside the harbor's defensive perimeter. Silent and low in the water, the diesel-electric vessel adjusted its bearings and fired 2 heavyweight torpedoes, each more than 20 feet long and racing at over 50 miles per hour, aimed straight toward the Ukrainian USV formation, probing the coastline. For a moment, it seemed the sea itself had turned into a weapon. The torpedoes churned white trails through the black water, closing the gap toward the unmanned craft. But Ukraine had anticipated this countermove. Small escort boats, less than 150 feet in length, had been trailing the USVs, towing specialized sonar nets designed to create a distorted acoustic picture. Alongside them, newly deployed underwater drones released bursts of synthetic noise, mimicking engine signatures and propeller cavitation. To the Russian fire control computers, the sea lit up with a dozen false echoes. The torpedoes veered, chasing phantom targets into open water, detonating harmlessly in a distant spray. The reprieve was brief. The Kilo class, now rising to periscope depth for a clearer picture, exposed itself at the wrong moment. One Ukrainian USV, carrying a warhead of nearly 400 pounds, broke formation and accelerated. Skimming across the chop at 40 miles per hour, it aimed directly at the faint silhouette breaking the surface. Russian sailors onshore glimpsed it only seconds before impact. The explosion came with a thunderous crack, a column of seawater blasting skyward as the drone slammed into the submarine's forward hull. The shockwave rippled across the harbor, rattling windows along the piers and sending vibrations deep into the port's steel framework. For an instant, the entire waterfront seemed to shudder. In Baltisk's command posts, alarms multiplied. What had begun as a drone diversion had now dragged the fleet's undersea assets into open combat. The harbor's defenders were forced to divide their attention, missiles and radars scanning the skies above, while sonar operators strained to find the next threat below. The message was unmistakable. Ukraine was not merely challenging Russia in the air or on the surface, it was contesting every layer of the battle space. And in striking a submarine within sight of its own fortress port, Kyiv had proven that even the silent hunters of the Baltic were no longer safe. The defenders of Baltiysk had absorbed the blow, but the battlefield beneath the waves had already shifted against them. The blast from the crippled submarine was still echoing across the harbor when the battle leapt skyward. With Russian defenses reeling from the undersea strike, Ukraine unleashed its most ambitious wave yet. From the western horizon, Bayraktar TB-2 drones swept forward at 18,000 feet, their wings glinting faintly against the morning haze. Each carried advanced targeting pods, relaying coordinates in real time to strike aircraft waiting beyond the radar line. Moments later, the deep rumble of Ukrainian Su-24 bombers rolled across the Baltic air, launching Storm Shadow cruise missiles that streaked low over the waves at nearly 600 miles per hour. The first storm shadows slashed in from the north, hugging the sea surface before climbing suddenly toward the coastline. Their targets were clear: hardened fuel depots and command bunkers nestled around Baltisk's piers. Simultaneously, swarms of kamikaze drones dove toward the harbor from multiple bearings. One group plunged directly at a fuel storage site less than 1,200 feet from the main pier, while others angled for radar stations and parked vehicles. The intent was overwhelming saturation, too many threats from too many directions for Russia's defenders to intercept at once. The response from Kaliningrad was immediate. Russian air controllers scrambled Su-27 fighters from Chekhovsk Air Base, less than 20 miles inland. Within minutes, the jets were roaring overhead, afterburners cutting through the low clouds, climbing to intercept the intruding TB2 and storm shadows. Contrails twisted into the sky as air-to-air missiles streaked across the battle space, exploding into blossoms of fire. The fight that followed was chaotic, an aerial brawl layered directly over the smoking port. Ukrainian drones tried to evade, diving and climbing in erratic arcs, their electronic warfare modules spitting jamming bursts across Russian frequencies. Storm shadows, flying autonomously, adjusted course mid-flight to avoid interception, skimming just 100 feet above rooftops as they closed the distance. Below, Panzer S-1 units fired volley after volley, tracers stabbing into the sky, while Buk-M3 missiles chased shadows across the radar grid. Despite the ferocity of the defense, at least one kamikaze drone broke through. It slammed into the side of a massive oil tank near the pier. The detonation thundered across Baltiysk, sending a column of flame hundreds of feet high, black smoke curling upward like a signal to the entire Baltic Sea. Fire crews scrambled, but secondary blasts followed as pipelines and storage drums ignited in sequence. Overhead, the dogfight raged on. Ukrainian TB2 provided steady targeting, even as Russian Su-27 scored kills, knocking several from the sky. Yet each second the fighter spent dueling drones meant another storm shadow slipped closer. For Baltisk's defenders, the nightmare was unfolding. While they fought for control above the harbor, the true danger was racing in at wave-top level, invisible until the final moments. In this phase, the port was no longer just under attack. It had become the center of a three-dimensional battlefield, where steel, fire, and sky collided in the most volatile strike yet. The air above Baltiysk was chaos, and in that chaos, Ukraine pressed its advantage. The skies above Baltiysk were still lit with missile trails and burning drones when the decisive strike unfolded below. With Russia's air defenses fully engaged against storm shadows and kamikaze UAVs, a new threat crept silently from the north. It was a low-profile Ukrainian USV, its hull coated with radar-absorbing panels and running nearly invisible at less than 5 feet above the waterline. Packed with nearly 1,000 pounds of explosives, it pushed forward at 35 miles per hour, slipping past coastal radars, distracted by the aerial battle overhead. The timing was no accident. As the USV closed within 800 feet of the northern pier, a coordinated dive began in the sky. Ukrainian UAVs plunged toward a Staragushi-class corvette moored at the dock, their warheads slamming into its superstructure in near-simultaneous strikes. Flames erupted from the deck, the ship's own ammunition cooking off in violent bursts. Even as the corvette's crew scrambled to contain the fires, The true killing blow was seconds away. At precisely 4:37 a.m., the USV made contact. It drove headlong into the reinforced pier wall beneath the main warehouse complex. The explosion ripped through the harbor with a blast wave strong enough to shatter windows a half-mile inland. The pier's steel supports buckled instantly, cranes toppled into the water, and the shock tore open nearby fuel tanks. Fire roared upward, igniting the already damaged corvette and spreading across the dockyard. Within moments, a chain reaction began. Secondary explosions rolled through ammunition bunkers and fuel depots, each detonation feeding the next. Towers of flame rose hundreds of feet into the sky, painting the Baltic horizon in searing orange. Entire sections of Baltisk's waterfront were engulfed, warehouses collapsing as shockwaves rippled outward. What had started as a probing drone assault had now escalated into the unthinkable. The heart of Russia's Baltic fleet was burning from within. Baltiysk was no longer just a fortress under siege, it was a port consumed by fire. The inferno at Baltiysk raged on, flames leaping hundreds of feet into the night sky. When the echoes of the last detonation began to fade, amid the collapsing warehouses and burning ships, Ukrainian reconnaissance UAVs circled quietly overhead, their cameras capturing the devastation below. Through the smoke and shattered steel, small groups of Russian sailors could be seen crawling across the pier, some clutching wounds, others dazed by the shockwave. The fortress port was broken, but the men lying amid the wreckage were no longer combatants, they were survivors. Then came an unexpected act. From one of the hovering drones, small containers began to drop, guided by parachutes toward the ruined pier. Inside were medical kits, bandages, tourniquets, and morphine injectors meant not for Ukrainian fighters, but for the wounded Russians scattered among the debris. Over the drone's encrypted channel, a simple message was transmitted. "We strike to end the war, not to strip men of their dignity." For a moment, the chaos of battle seemed to pause. Even as fires raged and secondary blasts echoed in the distance, the sight of medical supplies drifting down through the smoke painted a stark contrast. Destruction and mercy coexisting in the same sky. It was a shocking image, one that carried beyond the battlefield. In the heart of the Baltic, amid the ruins of Russia's strongest naval bastion, Ukraine had delivered not only fire and steel, but also a message of humanity. Baltiysk lay crippled. The once formidable naval fortress was reduced to flames, and twisted steel 2 corvettes sunk at their moorings, ammunition depots torn apart, radar stations silenced. Strategically, Russia had lost its grip on the Baltic corridor. Submarines were pulled back toward Murmansk, and Kaliningrad stood exposed. Yet the strike ended not with humiliation, but with a stark reminder of humanity, the medical kits drifting down moments earlier. Still, the question lingers. What port in the Baltic can truly be called safe from UAV-USV warfare? Overhead, a column of fire climbed thousands of feet, as small Ukrainian drones vanished in